what do we always say about corporate media, especially MSNBC? But the big story in corporate media this week is not anything that we've been covering on the show. It's not anything that you've probably been thinking about out there in the audience. The big story in corporate media this week is that Fox News hosts knew that Donald Trump's big lie theory about the 2020 election was bullshit, but they pushed it anyway. Right? There's documents that reveal that a lot of the hosts knew that they were selling the audience a bill of goods on this, but whatever, it's good for ratings. They seem to like it. We're selling some ad revenue off of this. Let's just run with this, right? Now, when the topic came up on Bill Maher's panel on this week's edition of Real Time, MSNBC's John Heilemann, who was on the panel, referred to Fox as just a blatant propaganda network, uniquely unfit to call itself a news organization. Now, given MSNBC's own outrageous biases and tendency to propagandize their own audience, Russell Brand, who was on the panel with him, couldn't pass up the opportunity to just thoroughly dismantle both Heilemann and his bosses at MSNBC. This is chicken soup for the soul here. So let's watch.
I've not known you long, but I love you already. But I have to say that it's disingenuous to claim that the biases that are exhibited on Fox News are any different from the biases exhibited on MSNBC. It's difficult to suggest that these corporations operate as anything other than mouthpieces for their affiliate owners in BlackRock and Vanguard. And unless we start to embrace, and also, mate, like just spiritually, if I may use that word in your great country, we have to take responsibility for our own perspective. I've been on that MSNBC, mate. It was propagandist nutcrackery on there. I went on a show called Morning Joe. It was absurd the way they carried on.
Morning Joe. Yes.
Yeah, I don't know what it was. It wasn't morning. There was no one called Joe there. No one could concentrate. They didn't understand the basic tenets of journalism.
If you watch that edition of Morning Joe when Russell Brand was on there, he's absolutely right. It's like he was clearly fucking with them, but by halfway through the segment, they were completely off balance. Mika Brzezinski even says, like, I'm a little nervous, like I don't even know how to continue, but they couldn't cut to commercial because they still had segment time to do. So that's what he's talking about there. But now he really starts laying it on.
No one was willing to stick up for genuine American heroes like Edward Snowden. No one was willing to talk about Julian Assange and what he suffered trying to bring real journalism to the American people. And I think to sit within the castle of MSNBC throwing rocks at Fox News is ludicrous. Make MSNBC better. Make MSNBC great.
Ooh, hot. That keyboard is hot now. That keyboard's on fire. Sorry, I can't touch it. I gotta let it cool off before I hit the play button again. God damn. Just a barrage of truth from Russell Brand. And Lambert here in the chat said that clearly Russell Brand despises this bald dude. You could tell. Yeah, if you watch the whole show, he had daggers in his eyes for Heilemann from minute one. From minute one, he was out for him. And good for him. We're going to watch more, but let's take a little break.
As he should. I'm going to recommend a book. I forget the name of the journalist who wrote it. Begovich, maybe. It's a book called This Town, and it the guy got a lot of shit for it because it was a case of a journalist revealing how this whole antagonistic these journalists versus these journalists, these politicians versus these is kind of WWE. And one of the things he mentions is that Joe and Mika kind of lead the morning jog, so you get all these people from, the Rupert Murdoch side of things or from the MSN. They all get together and jog together in the morning. He talks about things that even if you're a politics geek, you don't know about, like the fact that Dubai and the UAE pays all of these people outrageous sums to go stay in these luxury hotels and give speeches. And it's all these people who are arguing with each other on the air. They're all hanging out at the bar at these hotels in Dubai, being paid to give speeches. So
exactly.
Having a guy like Russell Brand dropped into the middle of Morning Joe, which is really the epitome of what he's describing in this town. Like they are really the vanguard of that cozy access journalism. That's why they were friendly with Trump until it became toxic to be friendly with him, right?
Exactly.
Because Joe and Meek are the epitome of that non-ideological, aristocratic Washington elite mentality and lifestyle. So having Russell Brand dropped in there just did, and yeah, like anyone who hasn't seen that, it's all over YouTube. You can find it. It's hilarious because it's just they don't even know what to do with that.
Right.
With someone
exactly.
just being dropped into, of all places, Morning Joe and telling the truth.
And there are like 6 hosts who are trying to interview him, and none of them could break through because he's just toying with every one of them. Yeah, exactly.
Fred, I would the moment
Fight them on a territory you can win on, Joe.
Russell, darling, the moment that you give me a specific example, an actual example.
Okay, I'll give you one.
Wait, just wait.
Wait.
Just
we need a specific example.
How about let me tell you what the specific I'd like to hear of. I'd like to hear a specific example, specific example of an MSNBC correspondent or anchor being on television saying something they knew was false, and we're saying behind the scenes to people, I'm about to go out, and we know that the election wasn't stolen or something equivalent. But I will go out on television and say the opposite. I will lie.
When's my answer?
See how he keeps filibustering because he doesn't really want him to answer? It takes Russell Brand forever to actually get him to let him answer the question.
Sir.
Just give me the specific example.
I understand the basic point.
Give me a specific example.
All right.
I think
he doesn't want it.
It's not. That's your own bias. It's not about bias.
Yeah, let him answer.
Because you don't actually know anything about any of these organizations you're talking about, even on MSNBC ones. Big fucking deal.
My darling, it was more than enough.
You can't come up with you have a single actual fact.
Do you want an example?
Keeps
Do you want
filibustering.
an example?
Yes.
Keeps filibustering, this literal dickhead. I mean, if South Park had a giant talking dick character, they wouldn't even have to animate it. They would just cast this guy. It would save them quite a bit of budget and time. But here we go. Now we're going to get an answer.
Enough.
You can't come up with you have a single actual fact.
Do you want an example? Do you want an example?
Yes.
The ludicrous, outrageous criticisms of Joe Rogan around ivermectin, deliberately referring to it as a horse medicine when they know it's an effective
Non-responsive, he
medicine.
says.
Yeah,
that's not a bad
Rachel
example.
Maddow turning up on the TV saying,
These
if
are the
you take
libs.
this vaccine, you're not going to get it when it hadn't been clinically trialed for transmission.
Non-responsive.
You have to listen.
Wait.
These are the libs. What do I always tell you? The libs will not argue with you. When you checkmate them, they just find a way to give a cheap retort that does not address any of the substance of what you say. And watch what happens here. This is what really happens. Watch.
Of America by
think we could all
determinedly
be
and
better.
avowedly condemning Fox News without acknowledging that you're participating in the same game. Did you not just listen to Bernie Sanders, someone who plainly, legitimately believes in this country and believes it's possible to change, but is bound by corruption, is bound by the lobbying system? Surely it's clear to you, Bill, as one of the great pundits and experts and comic voices, that systemic change is required. Money has to be taken out of politics. We need new political systems that genuinely represent ordinary Americans so that we can overcome cultural differences. And bickering about which propagandist network is the worst is not going to save a single American life, not improve the life of a single American child, not going to improve America's standing in the world, and the world needs a strong America. I'll tell you that. I'll tell you that. So you have an obligation, a duty, not to condemn these people.
Hot keyboard again. Hot keyboard again. Red hot, red hot. But what I'm referring to here, and I said, take a look. You may have missed
Needs a
it.
strong America. I'll
Here
tell
we go.
you that.
We have to look closely
So
here.
you have an obligation.
There's that liberal cat stare I'm talking about right there. Just a blank look, staring into space. He doesn't have the guts to actually look at Russell Brand while he's saying this because he knows how fucked he is. But there it is. Just that, just what? You're talking to a wall with these people. And this relates to all the Marianne stuff we've been doing, because if you're advocating for Marianne Williamson's candidacy, understand, in order to win a Democratic primary, you have to convince people who can look at this conversation and actually think that John Heilemann won this argument. Most Democratic
Yes.
primary voters believe John Heilemann got the better of Russell Brand in that argument. That's what you have to understand there. But wow, what a performance. And look, if you do not have an HBO Max subscription because it costs money, Real Time puts audio podcasts out of every show. I have not recommended an episode of Bill Maher in years. You got to listen to this one. Brand is just on fire from minute one till the last second. It is masterful. Right after that segment, they went into Brexit. I believe that segment was perhaps even stronger than this one, but that recycles some of the older themes about the disaffected working class. Like, I feel like we've done that enough, but this was just him owning this guy and his network and his bosses right to his face in such brilliant fashion. Well done.
Yeah, and that's really the perfect person to pull that on. Like, the only better would have been Rachel Maddow. Oh my God, what I would give Russell Brand and Rachel Maddow on the same panel, but Maddow would never take that offer. She's too cagey. She's too smart.
Oh, Maddow is a Rhodes Scholar
in a position to get called out like that by Russell Brand.
And just to address, because, you know, Russell made the point about the Schmeiver-Schmeckton and things like that, you know, we can't talk about in detail because YouTube is East Berlin. But we can, I can point to another example, and this is another example that we're not allowed to talk about in detail, but John Heilemann said the Fox News hosts are going on and parroting the big lie, even though they know it's nonsense. Let me just put this tweet up on the screen because this was real. Okay. This was real. This was a YouGov poll. This was not some kook poll that came out at the time. In 2018, you could read it right there. 67% of Democrats believe it is definitely true or probably true that Russia, we're not going to risk tripping any censors here, but you can read it on the screen. I'll read it for the audio podcast. Look what that says, everybody. If you are only listening to us right now and you have another window open that you're watching, close the Pornhub for a second, come over here, look at our screen here, and read what that says. You think that's by accident? You don't think MSNBC was deliberately, through innuendo and lies and propaganda, putting in their dumbass fucking moron viewers' heads that those results were not on the up and up? Just because they don't come out and say it doesn't mean they don't spread bullshit knowingly and consciously in order to gin up ratings. Robert Mueller's name was said every single day but one, between the 2016 election and the publishing of the Mueller report. On the day his name wasn't mentioned was probably a day where some horrible tragedy happened, and that was wall-to-wall coverage. They pumped that Russiagate story every single day. You're telling me Rhodes Scholar Rachel Maddow didn't know she was lying to her audience? You want me to believe that? Seriously? I mean, the argument that Heilemann is making there is absurd, which is that most media doesn't lie. Most media outlets don't lie. Like, Fox News is the only media outlet. I mean, it's just absurd on its face. But given the Russiagate example, it's especially outrageous.
Well, and we were talking about this before the show. A poll circulated a few years ago that was testing how accurate the understanding of current events was among people who consume different media. And yeah, like the people who watched Fox were slightly more incorrect in their answers. It was something like 56%. But then MSNBC was at about 54% incorrect. And NPR came out the best with 52%. Now, you want to look at the liberal mind. I saw an idiot who was an NPR, like mainlining NPR moron, who posted that poll to brag about their devotion to NPR. And I pointed out the very obvious fact that the NPR viewers are only 4 points away from these Fox people that you're supposedly so superior to, which I would say, unless they sampled 1 million people, is probably within the margin of error. So this poll actually proves that taking in NPR doesn't make you any more informed than somebody who watches Fox. They had, of course, cat stare. Yes, absolutely. Right. But how stupid would you be to read that poll and not take it as a rebuke of your beliefs, but a confirmation of it because you're 4 points better than a Fox viewer.
And it's also not even a question of necessarily how uninformed you are as a whole, but it also matters here, if we're going to parse this, which issues you are uninformed about. Right? The Fox viewers may be more uninformed in general on issues like the big lie, which ultimately resulted in some yahoos walking around the Capitol smearing shit on the wall for a few hours. Yeah. But the MSNBC viewers are far less informed on the Russia-Ukraine war. Right? If you watch Tucker, you have the straight dope on that war, much more so than if you watch Chris Hayes at 8 o'clock. Which issue is of greater consequence? MSNBC told their viewers during the Democratic primary that Medicare for All was about taking health care away from people. They actually parroted, that was their attack on Medicare for All, that you're going to take health care away from people. When the legislation was readable to all of the anchors who supposedly were telling the truth as they saw it, that it was a phased-in plan over 4 years, which simply swapped out private for-profit insurance plans with a government-backed healthcare guarantee. You are not taking away people's healthcare. You are taking away their copays, premiums, deductibles, and hours on the phone arguing with insurance people who refuse to pay for the medicine they needed. That's all you were taking away with Medicare for All. But they parroted the line nonstop that this was a threat to people's medical coverage, when it was the exact opposite. Once again, you want me to believe that Chris Hayes, a former labor reporter for In These Times magazine, a very good magazine to this day, he used to write there. You're telling me he didn't know that? You're telling me he didn't know he was bullshitting his audience about that? Get the fuck out of here. It's a joke.
I can't remember exactly who he was interviewing. This was during the Sanders campaign. But somebody he was interviewing started to go off script. This is Chris Hayes. And they caught him on camera going like this to the person. Do you remember what I'm talking about?
No.
This clip was making the rounds a few years ago. So look, I mean,
I hadn't even heard of that. That's why I was just laughing at it, because I didn't even hear it.
No, yeah. He on camera was doing this, like, get off that, you know. So this
is a good move. I have to learn that for you for certain topics. Sit over here like, all right.
It won't work. You do that. You just text me on the side.
Or what about this? I just there.
Yeah.
There we go.
Ixnay on the child drag shows.
Yeah, right, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, look, when you decide to go work at a place like MSNBC and you're coming out of a place like In These Times, you're signing the blood contract. You're signing the contract with the devil. You know that's what you're doing. Maybe you justify it to yourself by saying, well, I'm gonna have such a platform. You know, I'll do some stories that do good. And, you know, if you feel a need to tell yourself that. I think also when you think about the world that they live in, who do they talk to who contradicts them? Right. I mean, they only talk to other liberals who are not going to call them out on lying.
John Heilemann lives in New York City, right? I mean, who in his life is going to tell that to him?
Right.
And he just happened to have the misfortune of being booked on Bill Maher the same night as Russell Brand. Because Bill Maher usually doesn't book guests like that. Bill Maher usually books, it's basically an R-rated morning Joe show is what Bill Maher has turned into at this point.
Sure.
Right?
Sure.
But yeah, he got a tough break there.
Please clap.